in Strasbourg, the European Parliament, for this very important debate with the members of the European Parliament on the future of the European Union. For us, it's very important to know the German position on the most important issues on the future of our Union. We know the position of the European Parliament, we know the position of the European Commission, but for paving the way for a better Europe, we need to change Europe, but it should be a big mistake to destroy Europe. We want to be European also in the next years. The European Parliament wants more power. We are the only one European institution elected directly by the citizens. On the budget, we want to decide before the European election. We want to increase the budget from 1.1 to 1.3. We want own resources. On immigration, the other important issue, we want to cooperate with the Council. We want to achieve good solution on Dublin reform. It's possible to achieve an agreement before the end of this year. And also, if we want to achieve good solution on immigration, we need to invest more in Africa. We need a plan for Africa. We need more money in Africa against climate change, against terrorism, against poverty, in favor of growth. Not a new colonization, but a new modern cooperation between Europe and Africa. For this, we need also a European foreign policy with an European defense. This is very important for us. This is very important for the future of the European Union. Thank you, Chancellor, for being here, and you have the floor. È aperto il catch the eye. The catch the eye is open.
Sehr geehrter Herr Präsident.
President of the European Parliament, dear Antonio Tajani, President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, ladies and gentlemen, members of the European Parliament, commissioners, ladies and gentlemen. Over 50 years ago, Walter Hallstein, the German president at the time, described European unification as an exemplary experiment. And this was 10 years before the first direct elections to the European Parliament. At that time, the European community was still in its infancy. A lot of the achievements, such as Sherman, the internal market, were visionary projects. But the foundations had been laid, and hundreds of years of wars and dictatorships for the citizens of Europe were over. And for the first time, they had a stable and peaceful future ahead of them. Today, I'm here with joy, but also with gratitude in front of the greatest parliament of the world. We have 751 members from 28 countries representing over 500,000 people, approximately 7% of the world's population. In this House, we feel the heart of democracy beating. carried out by 28 countries, and this describes something which is so important about Europe, its diversity. This is one of the greatest strengths of us in Europe, because despite our diversity, we have a commitment to unity, to compromise, despite our different origins, despite our different opinions. What we are doing here is to come to results which are to the benefit of our community. It's a year since I last spoke to this House. In 2007, Germany took over the presidency of the Council. I talked at that time about the diversity which brings us together, which does not separate us, about the peace which we have to defend, about the fact that we in Europe need to breathe good air. I talked about freedom and diversity being connected in Europe. I spoke about tolerance. I also mentioned the fact that tolerance is the soul of Europe. It is an indispensable basic value for we Europeans. And last year, we have experienced how much the world has changed. And we have experienced also how the soul of Europe is being affected. The global, political, economic and technological challenge which we have to face are moving forward at a more and more rapid pace. We have experienced a series of crises. We have experienced international terrorism, violent armed conflicts and migration movements which have had a serious impact on us in Europe. And of course, digital progress has considerably changed our lifestyles. We are experiencing the results of climate change, and we are seeing our values called into question. The United Kingdom is a country which is soon going to leave the European Union, and this is a deep wound. And I think that turning now to Michel Barnier here for the work that he has done, I think that we can all applaud him for it. Dear members of the European Parliament, we are all realizing that it is very difficult, ever more difficult, to balance development, but also we are experiencing the fact that it's becoming more and more difficult to speak alone on the global stage to push our interests forwards, and thus it becomes even more important that we stand side by side as Europeans, and thus the European Union, more than ever, needs to respect both the interests of its own members and of others. We need to understand that tolerance is the soul of Europe, that it is an essential component of what makes us Europeans, and that only together with you can we develop to ensure that we also take account of the interests and needs of others as well as of our own. And that brings us to the core of European solidarity, without which we cannot be successful. And this solidarity is based on tolerance, and it represents our strength as Europeans, which we can find nowhere else. There are three reasons for this. First of all, solidarity is a universal value. We have to work for each other. It is an essential prerequisite for every operation, for families, for villages, for sports associations, as well as for a community such as the European Union. Solidarity is a component of the European Treaty. It is a central feature of our values. It is a cornerstone of Europe. It supports economic development and also helps us combat youth unemployment. We are faced either with terrorist attacks or other attacks on our values. We have the European crisis, the so-called umbrella, which was to cover us and help us and help to solve our financial problems. We have a few examples here which demonstrate how individual countries of the European Union and citizens of the European Union are in difficulties, but they do not stand alone. So we have a few examples of this, but on the other side of the coin, we have national issues which always have an impact on the community as a whole. Therefore, secondly, solidarity is always linked to commitments of the community. And the principles based on the rule of law in my country, the rights of the opposition and civil society are adversely affected if press freedom is curtailed. But state based on the rule of law and the rule of law in general is something which is not just national, but is for all of us throughout Europe. For Europe, of course, can only operate properly as a community which is based on law and when those laws are applied. If individually we try to deal with our problems, then we compromise the strength and stability of our euro, because our common currency can only work properly if each individual member shares the responsibility. Who actually tries to jeopardize the agreement of Europe on individual issues, for example, human rights policies or others, is adversely affecting the entire European foreign policy. And Europe can only be a voice to the world if it works together. And that means that solidarity always means that we have to overcome national egoism. And I am well aware of this. I am from Germany, and I know that this has not always been the case. For example, in the years before 2015, we took far too long to realize that the issue of refugees was an issue for the whole of Europe and not just for Germany. And in order to understand this, we have to realize that this is a common European task. And thirdly, using solidarity for everybody means that we have to deal with our own interests with a view to others. We have to respect others, but this is not something that contradicts looking after our own interests, quite to the contrary. For example, we need to work to combat migration problems with third countries. This is an issue which Mr. Tajani just brought up. We have to, at the same time, ensure that people on the spot have their living conditions improved, because it is often because of difficult conditions at home that they flee towards Europe. Now, looking at climate change, this has economic and social consequences. It is crucial that we tackle this. It's useful for Europe if industry and threshold countries produce less greenhouse gas and our whole system becomes greener. But it is also important for all Europeans if they develop better stability within the Eurozone. It's useful for all Europeans if everybody participates in protection against climate change. It's going to help all Europeans if we tackle together those who are affected by immigration. Accepting refugees by different member states on the basis of their democratic development and their own histories has triggered off different reactions. Solidarity means that we should do absolutely our utmost to find a common approach to tackle this and other subsequent results. Work together as a community. So, solidarity is a universal basic value. It is a responsibility for our community, and solidarity is also in our own interests, the interests of our well-being. So unity and determination are key for us. I would like to raise three issues which I feel are particularly important. First of all, foreign and security policy. As Europeans, we notice that we can defend our interests when we work together. Only a stronger Europe is going to be able to defend its values and interests worldwide. And the times when we could rely on others are past. This means that we as Europeans now have to really take our fate fully into our own hands if we want to defend our community. And that means that in the long term, we in Europe have to develop our foreign policy more. We need to think this through. We need to try and do without people working on their own behalf for the benefit of our citizens. I have suggested that we establish a European Security Council with changing presidencies of the member states where decisions can be taken more rapidly. We have to create a European intervention force so that we can tackle issues immediately on the ground. We have already achieved cooperation in the military sphere. That is good, and we are going to continue to support this. But what we should do, and this is really important if we look at the developments of the past years, we have to work on a vision of one day creating a real, true European army.
Ja,
Non
so
sapevo
ist
che
es.
ci
Denn
fossero
Jean-Claude
dei lupi
Juncker
in
hat schon vor
quest'Aula.
Okay. Jean-Claude Juncker, some years ago, already said that a common European army would show the world that there will never again be war in Europe. I'm not saying anything against NATO. Of course not. We can be a good supplement to NATO.
Aber liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen,
But colleagues, it would be a lot easier to cooperate with us if we have more than 160 different weapon systems and the US has only 50 or 60. And if we had, we realize that all the different instances need training and education. And if we could work together and pool our efforts together, then we could work together with NATO, with a European army.
und das schließt dann natürlich,
I'm really pleased about this. This is great. I'm annoying some people. I'm in a parliament.
Dazu gehört dann im Übrigen auch die gemeinsame Entwicklung.
So we need the common development of armament systems within Europe, and this, of course, means a difficult task for the Federal Republic of Germany, because we are going to have to develop also a common European arms exports policy. Ladies and gentlemen, let's now come on to the economic issues. This is the basis of our strength and is the prerequisite for our position in the world. because if we're not economically strong, we're not going to be politically strong. And I am very pleased to have looked at Jean-Claude Juncker's plan, the investment fund, which has had a considerable impact over the past few years and has 500 billion euros invested up until 2020. 350 are already in the pipeline, and a good program for better investment is something which is really important. We've been working on it for a long time, and I think we should be talking about this now. The 350 million are a real contribution to improving prosperity in Europe. And of course, to a stable Europe with well-being for its citizens also needs a stable economy. We need to develop our monetary policy better. We're working on a banking union. Germany and France have already made statements on this, and I think that we need to link very closely to the midterm MFF on this. We have to look at responsibility and control, a banking union, and then later a European insurance system. And this is something which is going to reduce the risks of national country governments, because, of course, what we're looking at here is something which is two sides of the same coin. But here, the European Council, at least Germany is on board, together with France, is going to be able to make more progress. We've had intensive discussions over the past few days on digital taxation, for example. You've participated in that, I know. Germany is not asking whether. We feel that this goes without saying, but the question is, how are we going to do this? And I think that what is important democratically is to take the comments of the Commission on board and to look at how, in an international context, we can also get an international solution. We are looking at minimum taxation, but if that doesn't work, we can't wait forever. We are going to have to work on it in Europe independently. If we're honest with ourselves, and if we look into the future and think about our lifestyle and well-being, we have to realize that it is not the same today as it was 100 or 150 years ago, that inventions always came from Europe. A lot of inventions and innovations now come from Asia and from the United States. And then, of course, we have to put the question to ourselves as to how, on our continent, we are going to determine the mobility of the future. We have to look at the fact that, for example, Chinese companies are investing in Germany. That's fine. But I want to make sure that we are stronger in Europe and that we want to be able to master the innovative technologies of the future. We have got the European instruments for this. We've got everything before us. We've got to look at quantum computing. We've got to look at the development of artificial intelligence. And this is still possible because we have a strong industrial basis in Europe that we can build upon. We have to avail ourselves of that. And research and innovation are therefore central focal points for our future well-being. And the third area, colleagues, which I should like to refer to, is immigration and refugees. During our crisis, we had to overcome many hurdles and come to a common solution. But we've been successful in many areas, but the issue of immigration is something which has not yet brought Europe together as I would like it to. This is a real core topic, an issue which reflects our relationship with our neighbours, and we've got to find common approaches. We have made progress. We all agree that we need a European border protection force. But perhaps saying that we have a Schengen area with free movement and then start working on who comes in, who comes out, then we find out that we are infringing the principles of that once again. It's true that we've developed Frontex. The Commission's proposals, in my opinion, are good. But if everybody wants to retain their international responsibilities and doesn't want to give anything away, they can be as big, as good as they want to be, but they won't be able to do what they have to. We have to work on this together. And we also have to think through development aid, economic development, and how we can participate. They have excellent results compared to what we had 2 years ago, because individual member states with the Commission have been working in individual member states and have achieved more than they would do individually. I think we can learn a lot from that, but this is just part of the way down the road. And I think therefore, we also need to develop a common European asylum policy. If everybody takes decisions individually, then nobody can be surprised that countries from a particular country know about a certain country immediately, and then we get secondary migration. We have to make an effort to ensure that we have the same common playing field for the internal market, even on issues such as right to asylum and humanitarian responsibilities. We have to deal with these issues together. We have to have a common policy. Ladies and gentlemen, I've just given you 3 examples of many that I could have come up with. And the fact that I have really hit the nail on the head is demonstrated by the protest noises that I've been hearing. I think that what people want is that Europe really tackles these difficult problems, these burning problems. We need to tackle the issues which are facing us, but this doesn't mean that Europe has to be everywhere. Not every problem in Europe is a European problem. Solidarity means that Europe deals with things where it is necessary, and when it does so, it does that in a decisive, effective manner. I think Europe gives us our best chance to lasting peace, lasting well-being, and a safe and secure future. In Paris, at the invitation of the French presidency, when we think that the First World War came to an end 100 years ago, once again, we should think through what happens if countries don't have a respect for each other, and what happens if countries and the associations, the League of Nations in those days, collapses. And therefore, we should not give up our European opportunity, because if we do, we shall adversely affect not just ourselves, but the younger generation. Nationalism and egotism should no longer have a position in Europe. But tolerance and solidarity represent our common future. And colleagues, it is well worth fighting for them. Thank you.
La parola ora, a nome della Commissione europea, al Presidente Jean-Claude.
And now I should like to call on Jean-Claude Juncker, the President of the Commission.
Monsieur,
Serve un veterinario in quest'Aula, forse?
Do we perhaps need a vet here in the room?
Presidente, sehr verehrte
President, Chancellor, dear Angela, I am convinced of everything that you have said here is correct. I'm very impressed by all of the comments that made. I'm just surprised that some people are not here to listen to what you've had to say. Standing ovations for the Chancellor are easy.
are speaking and saying the very same things. So thanks to this House to have discovered the same dignity of equal nations in Europe.
Monsieur le Président, aussi les commissaires sont beaucoup plus...
President, there are also a lot more commissioners here than there were for some of the other speeches as well.
Monsieur le Président,
President, I was very pleased to hear what you said about multilateralism. Multilateralism is one of the core values of the European Union, and what you said, it really goes to the heart of what the European Commission has been proposing. And I think there was a great deal of applause today, and a lot more than I got when I spoke in October 2014. And I think that history will prove you right. And not everyone here has always seen things that way, but you were quite right not to close the borders.
der CSU
there could be some more applause on that point than we've just heard. Now, on the issue of Brexit, we're swimming in the same water. I will just repeat that we do not want to punish the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom.
But I'm not swimming in that direction. I'm swimming exactly in the opposite direction. But
we have to respect the vote in the UK.
Best of it, in the interest of Britain, in the interest of the European Union. We are not in an aggressive mood when it comes to the future relations with Britain. The European Union, the continent, has to recognize that Britain, starting in 1939, was playing a major role when it came to the liberty and the freedom of this continent. We are grateful for that. But this is not the reason to leave the great history between the islands and the European Union. In fact, I do think that the leave is a tragedy, an historical error, a mistake, and we have to do the best out of it. And the European Commission, together with Michel Barnier, is moving into that direction. Was wichtig war,
what was important? I mean, of course, everything you said was important, but I was struck by what you said about Africa. Africa remains not a problem, but it is an issue for Africans. It's a great opportunity for Africans and for Europe. We need to work together in solidarity and friendship. The Commission has made proposals with regard to the external plan, and we should be building on those proposals. I appreciate everything that people say in favor of greater solidarity, but working with Africa is not charity. It is being part of a movement, but not wanting to do favors for Africa. We need a partnership with Africa between equals. Africa doesn't depend on us. We also depend on Africa. And so for that reason, we need to do more for Africa. So, all in all, Chancellor, dear Angela, I think the comments that you've made really go to the heart of what we need to do. And perhaps there could be a little bit more support for all of the brave initiatives by the Commission on immigration, on Africa, on the Euro reform. And if you do even more than you have until now, you will be even greater than you are, and we would welcome that.
Procedo adesso alla chiusura del sistema per la registrazione elettronica.
I'm now going to close the system of electronic voting requests for Catch the Eye. So now we're going to have the intervention of the different leaders of the political groups. First of all, Manfred Weber on behalf of the European People's Party.
Chancellor, President, ladies and gentlemen, if I could quote, the unity of Europe was the dream of not very many people.